Day 805 of the Ukrainian War Map, also known as the Russo-Ukrainian War. Juzzie here, and today is another update as I take a simplified and down-to-earth approach to some of the most important happenings on the ground in Ukraine. So starting off, we'll take a look at those Russian losses, as currently Russia sits on more than 478,000 military personnel losses, representing an additional 1,300 in the past day. Then as for hardware losses, 11 tanks, 35 APVs and 23 artillery. And as we take a look around at satellite imagery of artillery storage bases inside of Russia, we see exactly what we might expect to see. Usually 60% or more of their stored artillery just vanished. Of course, much of the leftover equipment likely has at least some level of inoperable impairment due to age, rust, and long-term outdoor storage conditions. Then headed across to the map and starting out in Russia, as in the early hours of the morning, an oil depot in the village of Yurovka in the Krasnodar region came under attack from drones. The targeted facility was struck by several unmanned aerial vehicles despite efforts to suppress the incoming threat. Approximately 6 drones were reportedly neutralized, but a few managed to penetrate the defenses and crash into the oil depot's territory. The impact of the drones ignited a fierce blaze, engulfing multiple storage tanks and causing significant damage to the facility's infrastructure. As the flames raged on, at least one large oil tank was visibly destroyed in the attack. Then, in a similar vein, deep within Russian territory, the Salavatneft oil refinery in Bashkortostan found itself under attack as well from Ukrainian unmanned aerial vehicles, despite its considerable distance of approximately 1,400 kilometers from the Ukrainian border. A video of the drone attacking the plant appeared on Russian Telegram channels, where we see what appears to be a Cessna or Foxbat style plane, an unmanned variant rigged with its own payload. Best I can tell so far, it was a Sky Ranger Ninja or an A-22 Foxbat, both of which are known to be produced and operated by Ukraine these days. And as for the distance, the 1,400 kilometers reminds me of Ukrainian intelligence chief Bordanov's former words or expression that simply stated, "deeper and deeper." So this event is potentially a record-breaking feat of distance traversed deep into Russian territory. Then headed into the Ukrainian map today, we'll start out in the east, as Russian forces have continued offensive operations north of Avdiivka near Osharatina, but for now seem to have come up against some challenging fortifications from the AFU. But where the most activity would be right now is in the settlement of Umanska, which is west of Orlivka, where Russian forces have been seen entering, although no updates on the main map as yet. So in terms of ammunition supply updates for the Ukrainian forces, President Zelensky has just recently confirmed that material was en route, but little had arrived as of a day and a half ago. However, based on the information we've seen in the last weeks and days, battlefield reports suggest some munitions have reached the front lines with specific artillery units of the AFU, potentially easing Ukraine's heavy ammunition shortages in some key sectors. But with at least several hundred kilometers of active front lines, it's likely a case of prioritization for Ukraine's recent history of extreme shell hunger. So what's most likely the case right now is that ammunition has flowed through to Ukrainian frontline positions at extremely active positions, including Robotyne, Osharatina, Chasiv Yar, and in the Crimea directions. Whilst at the same time, we see ongoing pockets of vulnerability from other Ukrainian positions, all in the meanwhile. Oh, and speaking of Chasiv Yar, there was a Russian objective to take it by today, May 9th, Russian Victory Day. But clearly, zooming right in, that never eventuated. Because unlike Bakhmut, which is several miles in the rear, the Russian army has since exhausted its supply of the 80,000 odd prisoners they actually used to take Bakhmut last year. As such, they could no longer take a page out of their old playbook. Then, looking around the map, as somewhere in the east, a Ukrainian heavy drone of the Baba Yaga type destroys a Russian position through cover of darkness. But also, we see the result of the work of a Ukrainian Baba Yaga type drone as well that destroyed a Russian self-propelled howitzer, the Akatsiya. But not to be left out, there was another Russian SPG destroyed, this time the Mr. S variant, and done so by FPV drone group the Muramasa from the 109th Territorial Defense Brigade. But where Russian hardware losses get strange today is in the south, as a group of Russian soldiers from an anti-aircraft missile brigade reportedly accidentally set their own Buktel on fire, destroying the air defense system in the Zaporizhia Oblast. So the Buk M1 TEL, or Transporter Erector Launcher, is worth roughly $10 million plus, and possibly a lot more, given that a complex battery has been estimated to be about $500 million worth. And as for the Russian servicemen operators that caused this to happen, well, it was stated that, quote, due to an error made by the crew, the vehicle started to catch fire, and that the fire engulfed the entire installation, which led to an explosion of the loaded rockets. So, Sergei the Smoker, once again, playing with matches perhaps. Or, equally as dangerous, untrained crews being thrust into new roles for which they lack experience. Then moving along, because it's a very special day today at the ending segment of this video, so I'll just firstly jump into some quick news. So starting off, the Russian Foreign Ministry has issued a stern warning that French troops will be considered legitimate targets for the Russian military if they are found operating within Ukrainian conflict zones. This stark declaration comes in response to recent statements made by French President Emmanuel Macron suggesting the possibility of French military involvement in the ongoing war. So France's Macron has been coming from a considerable position of strength in the last 4 weeks, as he's been somewhat tirelessly stating that if there were to be a collapse of Ukrainian frontline positions in the war, then France would seriously consider making the move of putting French troops on the ground in Ukraine. And so, as far as Russia's warning stating that French troops stationed in Ukraine would become legitimate targets, well, that's more or less a given, and not really even worth Moscow stating as such. Then, also in the news, and in a powerful statement at the European Economic Congress in Katowice, Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk urged Europe to invest, quote, big money in defense to create a world where, quote, no power in the world will dare raise a hand against it. Tusk also called for the increased defense spending and reiterated the need for a common European air defense system, envisioning a dome over Europe that would move the threat of war away from the continent's borders for the foreseeable future, if not permanently. Poland has been a significant contributor to Ukraine's defense, committing 4.3 billion euros in support, with 3 billion euros allocated to military aid. Then for some news that I might sneak into the Russian military mobilization blunder segment, as Indian law enforcement has apprehended 4 individuals suspected of orchestrating a deceptive scheme that lured unsuspecting Indian men to Russia with promises of lucrative employment, only to coerce them into serving in the Russian military in Ukraine. The Central Bureau of Investigation revealed that it had identified 35 cases of Indian nationals falling victim to this nefarious plot, with reportedly at least 2 casualties on the battlefield. And from this investigation, among those arrested was a translator, go figure, a facilitator of visas and transportation, and 2 recruiters operating in the Indian states of Kerala and Tamil Nadu. The CBI stated that the investigation remains ongoing, targeting other members of this international network of essentially what is tantamount to being human trafficking. Now, Russia's war against Ukraine has taken a heavy toll on its military, prompting Moscow to seek foreign recruits from countries in Central and South Asia and beyond, in an effort to minimize unpopular mobilization among its domestic population. Then to a final segment to round off the video today, as today was the annual May 9th Russian Victory Day military parade, which was an outstanding success. So after the event was cancelled in multiple regions throughout Russia, the show still went on in the capital of Moscow, where embarrassingly we saw just the same single T-34 tank on display this year, and possibly with 100 cutting-edge invisible Russian T-14 Armada tanks. But I guess we'll never know for sure. And today's event, in fact, turned out to be a bit of a game of spot the difference for me. Because at first glance, the event looked like a repost of last year's event, but on closer inspection we see on the left the 2023 Single Tank Parade, and on the right today's 2024 Single Tank Parade. Strikingly similar, down to the very same guy possibly, although maybe a little bigger bone from all the stress eaten in the last year. Also possibly a new jungle green paint job, a single change in the pole arrangement, and black round ski goggles instead of the rectangle silver ones from last year. Otherwise, still the same tank. Which is confusing that all the online Russian propaganda trolls constantly want to remind us that there's an extra 10,000 Russian tanks stored away, not yet used in this war against Ukraine. And if so, couldn't they then just spare a few for this event? Making for a more typical large Russian military day parade like all the pre-invasion years. Instead of this one tank repeat. Something does not add up there at all. And all of this is only made more ironic by the fact that the very nation they're at war against may have actually manufactured this very tank in Kharkiv 80 some years ago. Also, we saw that Russian soldiers were spotted openly patrolling, admittedly small Victory Day parade columns, with handheld drone jammers. Presumably guarding against a potential Ukrainian UAV attack, I'm sure. Doesn't smell like winning to me. Even the weather wasn't on their side today, with some spotty precipitation, and the worst weather all week. Hopefully they don't take that as a bad omen. Now, Putin, of course, made his speech stating that the Russian military strategic forces are always in a state of combat readiness, never mind the refinery and oil depot incidents that occurred on Russian territory just earlier today. Also, in something of an oddity, it appears Gerasimov, Chief of the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine and hero of the Russian Federation, notably absent from this event. Well, that's a bit strange. Russia, why are you sending all of these mixed signals of strength and weakness, all symbolized by a single tank and a missing Gerasimov? It's embarrassing. Also for this event, we possibly got a hint of the next-gen cutting-edge vehicles we are to see in Ukraine as well. 8-seater golf buggies. Then it also appeared that one of the servicemen participants lost his shoe during the parade. In the end, this embarrassing event, comprising of maybe 30 or 40 military vehicles total, which is probably what's used to guard the Kremlin, was just an embarrassing symbol of Russia's significant degradation of military strength and mass demilitarization as a result of invading their next-door neighbor. And yet, still, somehow I expected more from Russia than this underperforming, awkward, and cringeworthy 38-minute presentation of sadness. So that's it for today, guys. Thanks again for watching. Please continue to like, comment, and subscribe, and I do hope to see all of you guys there in the next one. Cheers!